I'm not going to say your name again because I might get it wrong this time. But fascinating technology that you guys are offering. Can you talk about SkySails and what exactly is it that you are trying to do?
Okay. First, thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. And I love to introduce what we are doing in SkySails, a German company, which is using the wind energy we have in high altitudes. That's why we call it a high altitude energy generation system. When I say high altitude, we are talking about the altitudes from 200 meter up to 400 meter.
Okay, so it's like fly a kite.
Exactly, everybody knows that.
An industrial scale one, yeah.
Right. In industrial scale. Everybody knows this from childhood when we had kites, when we raced them, when we felt the power already of these kites. Right. That is exactly the energy we are using, but of course with a much bigger kite nowadays.
Right.
And compared with the traditional wind energy systems, as we know, we have a more frequent and steady airstream in these higher altitudes. I think you know when you fly an airplane, also these airplanes using jet streams to be faster. And basically that is the effect we see. The higher we go, the more steady and harder winds we do get. That is exactly what we tap now to harvest and to produce energy. That is the basic principle of the SkySails.
Right. So talk about the system a bit. So you have this, I'm not sure if I'm using the right term. I mean, I say it's a kite, but it looks like a large parachute. But,
exactly.
And then it's tethered to
a ground station.
A ground station. Could you talk about that and I say describe it and how it basically works?
Yes. We have three big components in that system. The first, as you mentioned, is the kite itself, which is catching the wind.
Okay.
And the second system is a kind of electronic, we call it control pod, which is connected to the kite and take care for the control of the kites with strings to make them move left and right.
Right. So I hear it moves in a figure eight.
Exactly.
That's the one that creates the tension. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's a way how we call this a power phase.
Okay.
So when we reach 200 meter altitude, we start with a so-called power phase, moving upwards in figures of 8, and by doing so we are pulling out a tether which is 800 meter long, which drives via a winch where it is coiled a generator, and this generator is producing electricity. Basically very simple.
Okay.
The know-how is in the software and in the design of the kites to make this possible.
Right. Does the system require people to operate it, or is it all computerized? I mean, automatic? I mean, the way it's operating the kite, and I guess I don't know what it does, right?
Yes, you're right. It's a fully automatic system.
Okay.
Once the system is commissioned and set up, because we have to learn about the wind streams, we have to maybe adapt a little bit the setup in the software to make it fit perfectly for these conditions, is a system which is automatically flying. That means once the system is finished and commissioned, the system can produce energy 24/7 because of the steady airstreams we are facing.
Right.
So that is a big advantage compared with traditional wind energy.
So what you're saying is that at that elevation, it's not like what we experience on the ground where sometimes the wind dies. It's more or less steady. Is that how it goes?
More or less. Of course, we have also phases where the wind gets less and gets more.
Right.
In extreme cases, we have typhoons.
Right.
That is a moment where we have to bring down the typhoon to bring him in a typhoon shelter, as we call it.
Right.
But we can say compared with the airstream, let's call it airstream quality we do have below 200 meter, we see a more steady and constant wind stream. That is true. That is true.
I see. And talk about the station that it's connected to. What is it and what's in it?
Well, in the base station where we have the winch, where the tether to the kite is connected to, is basically the winch itself for the 800 meter of tether, which is connected to a gearbox and a generator. And then, of course, you have some power electronics behind that to adapt it to the grid frequency, to the grid voltage, whatever you have to connect it to.
Right.
But that is basic technology. That is nothing special. So that means also when it comes to maintenance, it can be done locally. So there is no need to bring in engineers from abroad. It can be done when you train the people. It can be done with local.
So it's
engineers.
a simple technology, essentially.
At that part, yes.
Right.
At that part, yes. When we talk about the software and the control, but that is something very, very unique. Nobody else does.
And the materials that you're using for the kite and stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when we think about wind power, of course, the thing that comes to people's mind is the windmill, right? And that we've seen this in the Philippines up north, where our president is from. We've seen some new development in Rizal province. How is SkySails different? Is it as efficient, less efficient? I know there are some issues as well with the windmills, right? But how do you compare?
Well, we cannot such easily compare it because we are different power classes. When we are talking really about the big windmills, we are talking about megawatts. Huge systems which nowadays get installed on these windmills. That's why we are with our 200 kilowatt kite. We are looking into niches where these windmills do not work.
I see.
Right? And that is exactly the unique selling point of that systems. It starts already with the installation. When you have a large wind turbine, you need to have a large foundation because this mast, this pole is pretty high and it needs to be stabilized in the ground and fixed in the ground. Our system just needs a 40 centimeter deep foundation where we put our container. Everything is already ready to go. It's pre-assembled. And basically you're just connecting the cables. We can make the rigging of these systems in 24 hours.
Right. So that's one of the drawbacks. I think that the one that you brought up, that it's not exactly carbon neutral. I mean, the wind turbines, they're very expensive, as you said. But when you say that your capacity is about 200 kilowatts, is that like, are you talking about the average size of kite, or can it scale bigger than that so that it can match like the capacity of the turbines that we see?
Just to benchmark these 200 kilowatts. This 200 kilowatts is a rated output power when we have a wind speed of 7.5 meters per second. When we're in a wind area where we have above 7.5 meters per second, then of course we are producing also more energy. So the generator can produce more output power. Right? But in average, we can say it's a 200 kilowatt system.
I see.
But I will give you a little outlook for the future. We are, of course, looking into larger kites. So we are already looking into developing the technology in a way that one day we can produce 1 megawatt or even more. Well, I think that is something we have to go to, because then we are really in that area, in this industrial size area, where we're talking about mass production of energy, rather than now where we are looking more into the niche markets, into the remote markets, where we have a lot of opportunities in installing these technologies.
Right. No, I was just wondering because when you talk about these turbines, you typically see them in clusters. I guess where the wind is, right? I was wondering if it's similar to your system, where you can deploy more than one kite, like in a specific area, or how much space would you need, like in between systems, so that they just don't get tangled up or anything like that?
Indeed, that is a big difference. The traditional wind turbines you can place quite close together.
Right.
You need to know that when we are talking about an 800-meter long tether, we have maybe in worst case also a radius of 800 meters we have to protect, or we have to have as a safety zone. And we don't want to have the situations that two kites collide, and therefore we need to have at least 800-meter distance from one ground station to the next ground station.
All right. Well, very interesting. Now, Nico, we'll just have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Business and Politics.